Okay, so let's go ahead and get back into our coverage over the X-Men. And we're going to pick up with X-Men issue number 73, 74, and 75. So three parts we're going to cover here for today's video. Now, with that being said, picking up with X-Men issue number 73, we're really picking up with Joseph. Now remember, for Joseph, he is this other Magneto because by this point we have seen two Magnetos, but for Joseph, it's him right now trying to figure out like his past still, trying to figure out who he is. Now, you have Joseph currently in the room of Rogue because around this time in Marvel Comics, you really had like Rogue and this love triangle between Joseph, her, and Gambit. But at the same time, there was like, she really did care more for Gambit rather than, well, Joseph. Either way, she does kick him out of the room because she's trying her best to sleep in for the moment. Now, we do shift over to some of the other X-Men who are still kind of working on rebuilding the school of Charles Xavier that was badly damaged in earlier events. But while you have the X-Men trying to repair the actual building, you did have Beast arrive with a letter from Charles Xavier. Now, remember, when it came to Charles Xavier, he was technically arrested for the whole idea of Onslaught. Now, when he was arrested, it wasn't really told to the authorities or like he was Onslaught or like what his actual crimes were. Now, when it came to Bastion, he had Charles Xavier locked up, but then out of nowhere, Charles had disappeared. This will lead into the hunt for Xavier. But either way, for the X-Men at the moment, they received this letter where it's Charles Xavier right now kind of saying like, Happy New Year's, I'm okay, I missed you guys. We already know that's not the truth at all. And really, when it comes to Wolverine, kind of hints at the idea that there's something off about the letter. And really, for the X-Men, they're not the only ones kind of wondering about, Charles Xavier. It's the same thing for Senator Kelly, who had recently had a change of heart when it came to the idea of mutants. Matter of fact, he was one of the few people who went out of their way to make sure that Bastion was no longer able to attack the Americans who are mutants because he wanted to kill off the entire mutant race. But it's also him trying his best to kind of look for Charles Xavier. Now, what also going on, you have Sebastian Shaw kind of wondering what should be his next move. Matter of fact, later on in this chapter right here, we're going to talk more about that. But something else I do want to point out is the whole idea of, well, Maggot. Because for Maggot, his origin is still kind of like a mystery to us by this point in our coverage over the X-Men. But it's also the idea that for Maggot, he called Joseph his friend because he believes that Joseph is Magneto. And so ever since then, for Joseph, he's kind of like, hey, you know what? I'm trying my best to remember my past, but unfortunately I can't. But I feel like you might have the key to help me remember my past. But also I want to know, like, how are we truthfully friends? And so you have Joseph really sit down and tell Maggot, like, we got to talk. So let's go outside right now to have a one-on-one private conversation. Now, while you have the X-Men kind of dealing with their own things, we switch over to Salem Center. That's the city where the school of Charles Xavier is actually placed at. But in the actual town, you have some detectives at the moment right now trying to figure out who's going around killing off people left and right because some dead bodies are now popping up out of nowhere. And usually this is a quiet town. But right now the dead bodies kind of point at the idea that it's somebody currently at the school of Charles Xavier. And really, speaking of the school of Charles Xavier, when we do switch over to it, we pick up with Dr. Reyes. Now, Dr. Reyes, one of the new members of the X-Men, alongside with Maggot and also Marrow. Speaking of Marrow, in our last video, she had stabbed Wolverine, right? And went into the tunnels of the Morlocks. Now, when she did that, she went to go check in on Callisto, who was badly injured in an earlier storyline. Now, when it comes to Marrow, what she did was she went back over to school of Charles Xavier, broke into Dr. Reyes' room, took her medical kit, and dipped the heck out of there. Now, for Dr. Reyes, she saw Callisto trying to get away and tried her best to chase after her. Beast got in the way. Now, For Beast, he also realized that for Dr. Reyes, her powers have begun to evolve, where she's no longer trying to use her powers in a more defensive type of way, but more now as a type of offense against her enemies, possibly down the road. Now, it's also Beast introducing the idea of New Year goals, because this chapter right here does take place around New Year's Day. And so it's Beast right now kind of showing off this piece of paper that he taped on the wall, hoping that the different members of the X-Men go out of their way to write down their goals for the entire school of Charles Xavier. But I want to go ahead and shift over to Sebastian Shaw. Here's the reason why. Because for Sebastian, man, this dude came back out of nowhere in the mid 1990s and was really trying to bring back the Hellfire Club he had, not the one his son was trying to build up. Now, for Sebastian, we saw in the X-Men videos that he really did try his best to bring in different people to his side. The problem was that it's taking forever to regrow the inner circle. As a matter of fact, at this Hellfire Club party, we see different characters there. We see Tony Stark, we see Angel, Psylocke, we even see Norman Osborn. Matter of fact, for Norman, he makes fun of Sebastian Shaw trying to reach the goal of, the Hellfire Club controlling the entire world. Either way, for Sebastian, an earlier storyline, he had received this symbol from Apocalypse. This will lead into a future storyline I'm going to cover as well. But it's also Sebastian kind of wondering, what should he do? Should he give up on the idea of the inner circle of the Hellfire Club, or try to continue that, all at the same time work with Apocalypse possibly? Now, back at the school of Charles Xavier, we do see that for Magneto, Joseph, and also Maggot, they begin to try to have this conversation with one another. This is where you really have Joseph begin to realize that he's not Magneto, that possibly he's something else entirely, maybe just a clone. But either way, while you do have the two guys begin to have their conversation, out of nowhere, you then have Magneto be attacked by a character we've been seeing for a good while now. And that would be, of course, Sabra. Now, for Sabra, she's here for an actual good purpose. But before we're able to kind of dig into that purpose, I want to switch over to Storm and Wolverine. Here's the reason why. Because for these two characters, well, they're kind of like best friends. But for me, over time in the X-Men comics, I feel like 1990s, especially when it came to Storm and Logan, you begin to see the two characters kind of look at each other more than friends. Like for Logan, he will always have Storm back, and the same goes for her when it comes to Logan. But at the same time, kind of get the idea there's something more between them. But either way, it's Logan saying listen, what happened to Marrow was a complete, not accident, but he meant to do it technically. And what I mean by that is, in an earlier video, you had Wolverine wanting to set Marrow in place. Because for Storm and Marrow, there's a lot of bad blood between those two characters. And so for Logan, he kind of went in his way to have this conversation with Marrow, listen, I don't care about your bad blood with Storm. You're part of the X-Men. So you now have to work with us as a team. But while you have those two characters talking, back at the post office in Salem Center, the city, you had the guy realize a package has arrived at the post office for Storm. Now, unfortunately, there's not enough stamps on it to make it over to Storm. So to him, it's kind of return back to Cinder. But then out of nowhere, all these different guys just pop in and say, that package better get delivered to Storm. Now, I kind of want to go ahead and switch over to Sabra. Here is the reason why. Because for Sabra, she works for the Secret Service, but in Israel. But the thing was, she had discovered that there was this guy out there who went out of his way to make a fake name for Magneto. The problem is that when she found that guy, he was killed off, and most likely done by Magneto. Now, we already know it was done by Magneto, but not this Magneto. Because of her, she believes that Joseph is Magneto, and he has to pay for his crimes. But that's when you have Maggot say, stop. That's not Magneto at all. And of course, meaning that we're now beginning the process of learning who is Joseph. Except now we have to switch over to Senator Kelly. And the reason why, because he believes that he has found Charles Xavier, that he will finally free Charles Xavier. The problem is that he goes to this cell where he believes that Charles being held at. Charles is not there. So the question is now, where is Charles Xavier? And then you also have Sebastian Shaw say, you know what? It's time for me to make a path, like choose my goal, choose my future. And so you have Sebastian go out of his way to begin the process of burning the symbol or the paper that was given to him by Apocalypse. And for Apocalypse, he's kind of like, perfect. You chose correctly. So again, this is moving towards a future storyline. Now we do get to the end of this chapter, we do see Maggot explain Joseph is not Magneto. Now, he's not really giving us a full idea of why he is saying that, or really more of what does he truly mean behind it? Because for Maggot, what he tells us is that no, Joseph, when I first met you, I thought you were Magneto. But then as we talk to one another, I realize you're not Magneto. And I really can't tell you anything else, but just know that you are not Magneto. Now, for Joseph, really does feel like he is Magneto. But it's also Sabra saying listen. Sabra. It's Sabra saying listen, why not come with me and you and I can work together to discover your actual past, your actual origin, to figure out if you are Magneto or not. And so he agrees. And so for Joseph, it's him officially leaving the X-Men to hopefully figure out what is his actual origin. Is he Magneto or not? But as we dive into issue number 74, we do pick back up with Marrow again. Now for Marrow, it's really more of her just trying her best to save the life of Callisto, who was again badly injured back in Operation Zero Tolerance. But no matter what Marrow does, nothing is truthfully working when it comes to saving her life. And really for Marrow, she's kind of hoping that magic will work as a way to save Callisto. But for Callisto, she's kind of listen, I'm going to die. So why not go ahead and just rejoin the X-Men? But now we have to transition over to, Archangel. Now, for Warren, man, he has gone through a lot, but it's really him going back over to the Morlock tunnels. And the reason why, because this is a massive callback to the Mutant Massacre. Really, everything is a callback to the Mutant Massacre when it comes to the 1990s content. But anyways, for Archangel, he was badly injured in the Mutant Massacre to the point where Cameron Hodge, who he had believed to be his friend, had his wings removed. And of course, that led to him meeting Apocalypse, turning into Archangel, a bad guy for a brief moment, and then join X-Factor, now part of the X-Men. But the whole idea that the Morlock tunnels is where that journey had truly began. So it's him returning back to where it all has started for him. But you also have Wolverine going out of his way to begin to investigate what's going on in Salem Center. The whole idea of dead bodies just popping up left and right out of nowhere. And we already know that technically the dead bodies are connected to the bugs that are with Maggot, because you do have Maggot realize that he's no longer truthfully able to control the bugs that are part of his power set. And so while you do have Beast, Dr. Ray as him kind of enjoying the good old snow day, it's also Maggot saying okay, listen, I need to get my powers under control, because right now these bugs are no longer trying to listen to me, follow my directions. They're now going out of their way to cause problems for me and most likely other people. Now, also around this time in Marvel Comics, when it came to the Morlock tunnels, you didn't just have the Morlocks living down there. You also had, Abomination as well. And as we all know, Abomination is usually more of a Hulk villain. But around this time in Marvel Comics, he was also he was living in the sewers. He was kind of making his own version of the Morlocks. The idea that a bunch of misfits who were humans and also mutants who who are removed from the surface society. And so he has been living down there for a good while. And so for Abomination, well, he runs into Archangel. And for him, Archangel does not really fit the whole idea of his organization, his misfit group. And so you have Abomination just begin to try to attack Archangel. But while you have Archangel trying to, well, survive, for Wolverine, he does meet Myra Armstrong. Now, for Myra Armstrong, she is the medical examiner. And so her main goal at the moment is to figure out, like, who's killing off all these different dead people. And so for Wolverine, he wants to see the dead bodies, where, of course, she can kind of show him the dead bodies that she has gathered so far. Now, we do kind of shift our focus back onto what's happening in the Morlock tunnels for the rest of this chapter for the most part, because we do see Abomination just trying to kill off Archangel. And you have Archangel just, he's really trying his best to survive here at the moment. But while you do have those two characters right now playing cat and mouse, well, we do shift over to Callisto. Because of her illness, she's not really able to see straight. And so at the moment, she believes that Colossus had came to see her. Now, we already know this is not Colossus for two reasons. One, Colossus most likely does not even know that Callisto is like seriously injured. But on top of that, for Colossus, he's with Excalibur at the moment, so there's no way that he'll be down here. We also learned it's not him, but because of her injuries, she can't see straight. So what she's seeing right now is somebody else about to inject something into her system. Now, to kind of wrap up this chapter, or really begin the process of wrapping up this chapter, while you do have Abomination try to find Archangel, you then have Marrow step in. Now, for Marrow, it's kind of cool here, like in a very strange way, because for Marrow, she's the one who has all the courage at the moment, while you have Archangel just basically being a scaredy cat. But once you have Marrow step up to Abomination, Archangel realized, like, you know what? Hey, I should step in. But it's also kind of like Archangel and Marrow helping out one another. And the reason why, because for Marrow, it's the idea that she looked at herself as a hideous being. Because for Abomination, once he finds Marrow, he wants her to join his group of misfits because the way she looks, the way she acts. But it's Archangel saying she's not ugly, she's not deformed, it's just that her beauty is there. But it's really more him saying the beauty comes from inside. And the reason why he is saying that, because for a good while in Marvel Comics, for Archangel, he kind of hated the way he looked. And the reason why, because of Apocalypse, you know, the metal wings, the whole idea of blue skin. But it's him saying, like, I looked at myself as a monster, but then I realized it's who you are on the inside that makes you what you are. So no, he's not a monster to himself, but neither is Marrow. And it's also Marrow helping him kind of refine that courage, because you do have Archangel step in to, you know, fight against Abomination, where of course he does lose very easily, but it's also Marrow using her bone knives as a way to cut the eyes of Abomination. Now, at the end of all of that, you then have, you know, Archangel try to have her rejoin the X-Men, but she does disappear. But we also get the idea that thanks to Archangel, he has kind of helped Marrow go on the right path again. But it's also him finding out that the Morlocks, or Marrow, was holding onto some of his old wings that were given to him by Apocalypse. But now, as we work our way into issue number 75, the last page of issue number 74, we see Wolverine trying his best to follow the clues, follow the trails of what has been going on in Salem Center. But then out of nowhere, he was also attacked from behind. So once he does wake up, he realized that most likely he was attacked by Maggot and his, well, bugs. And so as we dive into issue number 75, the big 75th issue for the second X-Men series, you have Wolverine wake up, right? And once he does, you have Wolverine realize that his healing factor is not really working like it used to in the past. But it's also Wolverine informing Storm, informing Cannonball to go out of their way to find, well, Maggot. And the reason why, because for Wolverine, he believes that most likely Maggot is not the actual murderer. There's someone else out there who's the actual murderer. And so you have Logan leave and hoping the rest of the X-Men can find Maggot. But for Maggot, he basically dipped out because he thought he is the actual killer. He believes that his bugs, the ones he really can't fully control, had gone out of their way to kill innocent people. But he has no idea that in reality, those bugs are, well, innocent. But the cops of Salem Center, their main goal is to bring in, well, Maggot. Now, they don't know it's Maggot, but they believe their killer is out there. We also see right now for Beast and Dr. Reyes, they're really kind of arguing about the idea of who could be responsible for the deaths of all those different people. And really, it's kind of Dr. Reyes proving that Maggot is innocent, but also it's kind of like the idea for me of these two characters slowly or possibly getting together as a couple because they do argue a lot, but in the way of like, these are two different people when it comes to science, medical, but also the idea of discovery. But either way, you have the two right now just figuring out who could be responsible for all the dead people over in Salem Center. Now, for Rogue, Storm, and also Cannonball, they're trying their best to locate Maggot, but while trying to do that, you do have Cannonball kind of act cold towards Storm. Now, for Rogue, she's kind of wondering what's up with them, but it's Storm kind of informing Rogue that earlier in this series, you had Cannonball get very upset when it came to Storm telling Cannonball how he should communicate with Marrow, saying like, hey, listen, stay away from her because she is a terrorist. She is a killer. And so it's Rose saying like, Storm, one, you don't have the right to control people, but also the fact like, two, you can't talk because you took me in and I was a terrorist in a way, but you also took in Gambit, a thief. You also took in Wolverine, his past. We still don't know everything about his past. So unfortunately, you really can't talk because, oh, here comes Marrow, this terrorist who killed somebody. And it's also Rogue saying like, I took people's memories away. Like there's folks out there who are most likely in comas or had completely forgotten their past. But as we do switch over to Wolverine, we see Wolverine find, well, the Nakari or Nakari Karen. Now, the Karen has been seen a few times in our coverage over the X-Men, especially when it came to the early days of the second X-Men team. Now, the Karen does lead into this demonic dimension where you have these demons, better known as Nakari, who would reappear over time in Marvel Comics when one of these Karens had appeared on the planet Earth. Now, the actual leader of this group of demons is a character known as Kirok, and I hope I pronounce his name correct finally. But either way, is Wolverine kind of wondering that is this the possible return of the Nakari demons, but also the return of Kirok as well? Now, you have Beast and Dr. Reyes appear as well, and you do have the three realize that they're being confronted by some wild beast. But for Rogue, Cannonball, and also Storm, they do find Maggot, where you do have the three inform Maggot like, hey, listen, your bugs are technically innocent. Like, they're not going around killing golf people. They're powerful, yes, but they're not really going after people at all and killing them. So once you have Maggot realize that technically he's innocent, but also he's allowed to rejoin the X-Men, you then have his little bug creatures try to find something, to go after something, and you have Maggot and the rest of the X-Men try to follow the bugs. The problem is that while trying to follow them, they are then quickly teleported somewhere else. But for Wolverine, Beast, and also Dr. Reyes, you have Dr. Reyes dip out. And the reason why, because her powers are not really more of playing offense, rather more playing defense. But on top of that, like, she has not been trained as an X-Men yet. So unfortunately, she can't do much yet. And so she dips out. Now, while she does dip out, you have Wolverine try his best to fight against these creatures. The problem is that these creatures, man, they are doing work on Wolverine's healing factor. Like they are truly affecting it to the point where they're not really are it's not really up to par as usual. And so for Logan, he knows that that means it could also affect Dr. Reyes' powers as well when it comes to her force fields. Now, for Storm, Cannonball, and also Rogue, they do learn kind of here that they have been teleported over to the Ukraine. Now, when you do have our heroes look around, you have Rogue and Storm see one of the Karens. Now, for Storm, she kind of realized this is a huge problem because usually the Karen only appears in the backyard of the X-Men home, and that's really it. But now here it is in a completely different area. So the question is now, how many of these Karens are across the world at the moment? And we do get a few pictures where we see different Karens just laying at different points across the earth because it's Storm reminding us that these demons have been trying to invade the earth, to take over the earth. These Karens are kind of like their doorways into the earth dimension. And so if there's more than one of them, then sooner or later they could possibly see an invasion. But also the fact like how many demons have already crossed over without anyone truthfully knowing. Now, speaking of Maggot, he's right now in the area between dimensions. So he's kind of just chilling out right now at the moment until he's confronted by one of these new creatures. Now, luckily for Maggot, Wolverine arrives as well, which also tell us like Wolverine and also Maggot had fallen into this between area of two dimensions. Now, for Storm, Rogue, and Cannonball earlier, they kind of tried their best to locate Maggot and then kind of realized that for Maggot, he was also most likely teleported somewhere else. And so you had the three characters also be teleported into this between area, but not with the rest of the X-Men yet. Now, for Dr. Reyes and Beast, they're also in this between dimension, but we're also going to use them as a way to learn, like, what are these new creatures? I just realized I completely forgotten about Marrow in this chapter. Yeah, Marrow had reappeared when it came to Wolverine trying his best to hold off the creatures to allow Beast to save Dr. Reyes, and you had Marrow save Dr. Reyes, but unfortunately they were overpowered by the Beast and captured. Now, Wolverine, as we saw, got away, but for Beast, Dr. Reyes, and Marrow, they were captured. Now, while you do have like these creatures trying to dissect Dr. Reyes, you didn't have these creatures inform Dr. Reyes like, hey, listen, we are not Nakari or Nakari. We're not them at all. We are a whole different type of demonic creatures. And that would be the Rutai. And I really hope I pronounced their name correctly. I already know I have somebody right now in the comment section like writing down some horrible things about me. Like, how dare you mispronounce all these demonic names? Do your research. I tried, guys. I sometimes do try to find like how to pronounce some of these names. And once you watch like 15 different videos and get like 15 different pronunciations for all these different names or demonic names, you're kind of like, you know what? I give up. Anyways, though, when it comes to the Rutai, they were slaves of Nakari. And so because of that, they were able to rebel. Now, once they did rebel and took over that demonic dimension, they had discovered the human dimension and want to go over to that dimension as well, of course, Earth. Now, all that being said, they were the ones going around killing God people because they were trying to study humans by dissecting them. So here's more proof of the idea that Maggot is not the killer at all. Now, with all that being said, now we also learn here that the actual leader of this group is a character known as Pilgrim. Now, when it comes to Pilgrim, it's kind of cool here because for Pilgrim, he looks at Wolverine as this great god. And the reason why, because in an earlier storyline, you had Wolverine, I want to say Nightcrawler as well, went into their actual dimension where you had Wolverine just go berserk, killing off a bunch of the Nakari demons. And because the Rutai were slaves, they watched Wolverine kill off all those Nakaris. But either way, it inspired them to rebel against their slave owners. And so with them now being here and they see Wolverine, they're like, oh my God, it's you. It's our great God. But you didn't have the X-Men fight against Pilgrim and his, well, Rutai followers. Now, with all that being said, the storyline does get wrapped up very quickly here because of one person, Dr. Reyes and her butt. Because with her butt cracking the eye of Kirok, you didn't have basically the X-Men and all the different people being kept in this between dimension all be teleported back to Earth, back to, well, Las Vegas. Now, you do have most of the Rutai head back to their dimension, but when it comes to Pilgrim, he was also able to escape over to Earth, but in a disguise. And so you do have the X-Men being able to celebrate the idea that they were able to save the world because Dr. Reyes, but all the other Karens across the world were also destroyed as well. So for the time being, all of these different portals that lead into a demonic realm is at a time, for the time, completely closed. But this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.